Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and we're going to be talking about the Billy Meier case this evening. I appreciate the folks that came to the show I had with Stuart Swordlow on Wednesday. If you're wondering why I haven't had more guests in a while, it's a combination of things. I've been working an unreal amount of hours, and I also had a lot of music stuff come up, and I can't seem to break free from the working the extra hours, and I never know how late I'm going to be working, so it's just hard to get all the extracurriculars together. So much for the excuses. We are on this evening, and you know, the Meyer information is practically endless, and I've studied so much lately on things like the book The Way to Live and the Might of Thoughts and the Psyche, and I've let certain information go, which has kind of drifted away from me a little bit, the information on Atlantis and Lemuria. So in addition to the spiritual teachings tonight, maybe I'll get a little bit back into that. As you know, if you've heard of this show and you've listened to this show before, Edward Albert Meyer is about 80 years old. He lives in a tiny mountain village in Switzerland, which is nestled in a pine forest, and is about 45 minutes east or so from Zurich. And Billy's had a very interesting life. When he was growing up even farther north in Switzerland, in Bulak, Switzerland, right around the end of World War II, he had a very fascinating experience one night when he woke up, crawled out a lower window in his bedroom, sat down on a bench that his father had made and looked up at a beautiful starry sky, and he heard his own voice say, "Since ancient times I lived among the stars." And he felt this strange longing for the distant worlds and the faraway places, and he could see the light which the stars emitted, but he recognized an invisible light that he called the love of creation. And this young boy was getting impulses from the storage banks in the earth and the universal storage banks, and these impulses were signals. And he realized what his purpose in life was and what he was going to be doing during this lifetime. And he always waited for the time when he could tell people what he experienced on that incredible May evening. I think it was in 1941, right around 3 or 4 in the morning. And Billy was even younger than 5 years old at this time. But he never really had the opportunity to tell anyone about his realization and his profound experience that evening. And then, it was about a year later, he started getting telepathic messages from a very ancient man. I shouldn't call him ancient. I guess he was nearly 1,000 years old, which is much longer than we live now on the earth. But allegedly, human beings live that long or longer. And one day we will have that long lifespan again. But Svath would appear in Billy's mind, and Billy could see his face, Svath's face, and then he would hear Svath's voice. And Svath's voice was speaking to him in the dialect of his home village, which was near Niederflachs in an area called Bulak, Switzerland. So young Billy was amazed by this experience too. And he told the local pastor there, Pastor Rudolf Zimmerman, about this experience. And lo and behold, Pastor Zimmerman also had these telepathic messages from the Pleiaren at that time. So Billy had at least someone that he could relate with and relate this information that he was having to. So imagine the difficulty of a young boy growing up in this beautiful area in Switzerland, and he's watching the bombers fly over at the time of World War II, and occasionally seeing one of these bombers shot down, and he's getting these telepathic messages, and only one person believes him. And then one day he gets a message to go out into the forest, and I believe the name of the forest, I think, is the Horgan Forest, there near the canton of Zurich, in the area they call Bulak. And then out of the sky came a silvery pear-shaped craft, which landed in a clearing, and out stepped Svath with kind of like a silvery diver's suit on. And Svath was a human being from a world that was quite some distance away, beyond our Pleiades, some 80 light years, and in a different space-time configuration. And these Pleiaren people had allowed themselves to be called the Pleiadians for years, but they're not really from our Pleiades. They're some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades, and they live in a different dimension. There are 7 dimensions in our universe. All of these dimensions are of a similar nature to ours in the sense that there are planets and solar systems and galaxies. But there are differences in these dimensions. There are physical realities. There are planets and peoples and solar systems. And one of the differences between Svath's dimension and ours is that the planets that have people on them are much closer together. So it isn't such a mystery to these people that there are human beings all over the universe. And the reason Svath had an interest in young Edward Albert Meyer is because his people, the Pleiaren, have the technology to track spirit forms over time. And to them, reincarnation is a reality, a scientific reality, and they can measure it, and they have the ability to recognize a spirit form. The spirit form is the part of you that remains during each lifetime. In other words, the spirit form reincarnates, but we literally get a new material consciousness and a new physical body each lifetime. And the Pleiaren had monitored the reincarnational pattern of Edward Albert Meyer because he had been, and Svath told Billy this when Billy was finally brought up into the ship. Svath told Billy that he had been the people that we call Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. And in these lifetimes, he was a teacher, and he taught an ancient universal teaching that the Pleiaren followed. And they were very interested in supporting him in these lifetimes because the Pleiaren recognize that the Earth is on the wrong course, and it's on the course of self-destruction. And they take responsibility for part of that because their people, the Pleiaren people, known as the Pleiadians to many, interfered with the people of the Earth in ancient times. And for example, 133,000 years ago, there was a society on the Earth that was made up of people, extraterrestrial peoples. Some of them from the Pleiaren system, some of them from Beta Centauri and other locations. So there was a very, very high civilization on the Earth 130-some thousand years ago. And we call that civilization Atlantis and Lemuria. And part of the human beings on the Earth at that time that died on the Earth became a part of the reincarnational patterns of Earth. And their spirit forms are about 12 million years old, whereas the typical Earth human's spirit form is about 4 million years old. So you can probably say with all certainty that you've been reincarnating for at least 4 million years now. Now, typically, when you come back, your memory is blocked. Your conscious memory is blocked at our level of evolution. You have to get to a very, very high level of evolution in order to start to get a clear recall of your past life. Now, occasionally there is a bleed over, and people do recall immediate past life, particularly young children. They have very vivid recall for maybe 5 years, 8 years old, 10 years old at the latest, and then it starts to fade and go away. And that's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be able to forget. This is a blessing. This is the way nature helps us. Because if we vividly remembered all the difficulties in all 4 million years that you've been reincarnating, all the people you've lost, all the friends you've lost, all the pets you've lost, all the disappointments you had, you could never even make any progress forward. So that's why those kind of memories are typically blocked. So your conscious mind can focus on the current reality that you're dealing with. Now, I talked about the reincarnational patterns first of Billy Edward Albert Meyer, and the fact that he had been Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. Well, all spirit forms reincarnate. We all have a spiritual consciousness and a material consciousness. Your spiritual consciousness never dies. Your spirit consciousness comes from something called your spirit form. The spirit form dwells in a center of the middle brain called the superior colliculus. It's the area of the brain associated with eyesight. And as your eyes move, you engage the superior colliculus. So Billy had contacts because these people know his spiritual consciousness, and they understand it's on a special mission here to reintroduce what's called the teaching of the spirit here on in the earth. And one of the creational natural laws the teaching of the spirit talks about is reincarnation. And reincarnation is important to understand for many, many reasons, because it gives us a greater sense of personal responsibility, because you are not going to escape from the dangers and the destruction you've done to your earth and to your society by death. You're coming back. It takes millions and millions, many millions of years to evolve to a high enough level where you start to lose the need for a physical body. That does occur. There are 7 evolutionary steps that human beings go through. The first step is primitive. The second step, hello Chris Lewis and Always Strive. The second step that we go through is rational life. The third step is called intelligent life. Most people on the earth are in stage 2. I think these stages are talked about in Contact Report 6. I've been meaning to get back into that. Stage 4 is called Stage 4 is I call real life. There's a longer term for it in the Contact Reports. Now, one of the things that happens in quote-unquote real life, civilizations develop incredible abilities for genetic engineering. For example, Semyase, Billy's third contact, had a beam ship that she brought to the Earth. The beam ship had a central computer that was not like our computers. This computer is biological. Not only that, it's intelligent and it's sentient. She could have conversations with it mentally. She could have telepathic contact with the central computer on her ship. For all intents and purposes, even though it was a metallic disk, Semyase's ship was alive. It was sentient. It had an intelligence. It was a living being with a metallic hull. Now, if that doesn't stretch your imagination, I don't think anything will. So that's what human beings can do at the fourth level of evolution. The fifth level of evolution is where the Pleyaran are. People at that stage become what are called kings of wisdom, Ishwish. And that's called the age of recognitions, where you can start to really recall your past lives easily. The king of wisdom, again, is a title, Ishrish for a woman, Ishwish for a man. That's the fifth stage of evolution. At this stage, you're in the final physical stage. The Pleyaran are there, and they really can't have contact with us anymore. They can have contact with Billy because the oscillation of his spirit form and the vibration is very compatible with theirs because it's tremendously old. His spirit form is very, very mature, as is theirs. It is very unhealthy for them to be in the physical presence of Earth humans at our level of evolution because our thought forms are very dangerous to them. It can cause them to lose control of their bodies. For example, Semyase fell and hit her head. She was in the Semyase Silver Star Center, and Jacobus, one of the other people at the Figu, walked in. She felt his vibrations. She lost her balance. She hit her head on a table. She was transported back to her beam ship. Eventually, she had to be taken away for medical treatment. And this is what caused Billy's meetings with Semyase to be cut short. So they do not wish to have contact with us openly. Again, it's very dangerous for them. Semyase, in Contact Report 10, said a lot of amazing things, and I'd like to read just a little bit of this to you. She says, the human bears a spirit that does not die, nor sleep during the deepest sleep. It records all thoughts and motions. It informs the human whether his thoughts are correct or false if he's learned to pay attention. I wanted to bring something up there because one of the skills that we're honing here by studying the Meyer material is the ability to pay attention and look at our thoughts. And even our spirit form will tell us when our thoughts are not correct or false if we pay attention to them. Now, here's a section I was reading today from the Might of Thoughts. And it goes right along with something else I have been studying. Regardless of how the human being's present situation and surroundings may form and may appear, they will always be in accord with his or her thoughts. And he or she, and thereby also his or her world, stands or falls precisely with his or her thoughts, as well as with his or her ruminations, visions, fantasies, ideas, imaginations, and wishes. It is the thoughts which create and sustain everything, which allow everything to remain, which raise it into a high, or to the highest heights, or which allow it to vanish. The human being is always as small as the desires and lower demands which control him. And he or she is as great as the high and highest positive, good, healthy, and pure strivings which he or she allows to dominate in himself/herself and in his or her thoughts. So, we always think, why are these weird circumstances happening to me? Well, it's because of your thoughts. And there is a passage in here. I'll have to find it. I'm not seeing it right now. One of the ones I've been thinking of lately a lot. It says, every human attracts and brings into fruition that which he consciously or secretly strives for and loves. So if you have circumstances in your life which are a little strange, we have subconscious and unconscious thoughts too. And we really bring into reality our own circumstances. And this is something that we have to wrestle with, because you'll think, well, why would I bring this into my life? Well, remember, you have negative thoughts. Another passage in the Might of Thoughts that Billy talks about says, humans who do not overcome their weaknesses and free themselves from their destructive and unhealthy thoughts will remain weak, wretched, and miserable. So pay attention to that spirit. Anyway, let me get back to what Semyase was saying. She said, the spirit within the human is the bearer of the creative realm, and every human has his own spirit. So we all have this spirit form, and it's reincarnated for at least 4 million years on the earth. And we are going through different experiences here in a physical body. And you really do have the power to help in control your life and improve your life if you learn to control your thoughts, because the power really, really is in our thoughts. So here's Billy. To get back to Billy again, he's this young boy. He's growing up in Switzerland. He's had his first contact with Spoth. He's been taken up into a ship. Spoth has taught him about his previous lives and told him that he'll have a difficult life during this lifetime, and that he would have people try to kill him. People would be filled with anger, and he would have a lot of difficulties in his life. He would also have some really amazing experiences. And after Billy studied under Spoth for 11 years, he got a second teacher, a woman named Asket from the Tao Universe. Now, Asket sent a robotic craft to Switzerland, and Billy was 16 years old at this time, and he was supposed to climb up this hill, which he did. And it was a hill in Switzerland. He would sit on a lot, and he would meditate, and he would just think about things. And he remembered when he was walking up that hill that particular evening that he was sweating, even though it was cold outside. And then something that looked like a falling star came down, and it landed, and there was this strange configuration of this tripod kind of landing gear, which was very weird to him. A door opened in the craft, and he walked over, and then he felt literally lifted up and pulled into the ship, and he could see that there was no one else in there. He sat down, and there was a bright flash of light, and he moved his hands above his face to protect his eyes, and he realized he couldn't even see his hands, and the ship became invisible. And then it's almost like he's floating through the air now, and he floats over to his village where he lives, and he's floating over his house, and he's just floating there for whatever reason. He doesn't even know why. And he just stays there above his house, floating in the middle of the air. I'm assuming he was invisible completely. He couldn't see himself. And then the craft shot off with a great speed. And it went all the way to the Giza Plateau. And, well, it went to Jordan first, and then Ascot's ship came, and then they went to the Giza Plateau. And Ascot and Billy went to the Great Pyramid. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Great Pyramid. And the Great Pyramid, its height is about 481 feet tall, 152 meters in height. It was symbolic of 1 meter for every million kilometers that we are away from the sun. So there was a ratio there between the height of the pyramid and the distance from the sun. There were a group of extraterrestrials that directed part of this construction, and they were from the Orion constellation. And the Orion constellation has 8 stars that are within 32 light years of the Earth. And one of these stars is called Orion, a hunter in Greek mythology. And Orion was a giant huntsman in Greek mythology whom Zeus placed among the stars. So these are the people that guided the building of the Great Pyramids. And the Great Pyramids on the Earth were built 36,000 years ago and about 73,000 years ago. What are the uses of the Great Pyramid? Well, about 9,500 years ago, there was a king named Saluk who had a son named Sarid who had these great visions of a gigantic flood. And he saw in his mind's eye a great comet coming to the Earth, which is what happened. It was a destroyer comet. There was this comet that used to come through our solar system at that time periodically. And it would have great gravitational effect on the Earth, which would cause the waters to move and would lead to this flood. So King Saluk, because of the visions of his son Sarid, had all these people that they moved into the Great Pyramid and underground into these old cubicle constructions. And they covered the Great Pyramid with, I think it was lime or lye or something, which would seal it up. When this flood came, they survived. So that was one of the uses of the Great Pyramid. The second use, they were used as tombs somewhat 2,000 years ago, a legend. And the third use was far below the Giza Plateau were these old cubicle constructions where a group of renegades, Giza intelligences went and tried to gain control of the Earth through religion for thousands of years. Now, just some of the construction facts related to the Great Pyramid. A very small part of the work was done with the aid of telekinetic devices and forces. And there were many people and animals that worked on this project for over a very, very long time. That was a bit of a tangent. Anyway, Billy and his second contact Ascot visited the Great Pyramid. Just a few words about Ascot. Her people are known as the Timmers, and they now reside in the Tao universe. Our universe is a parallel universe to the Tao universe. It was created 46 trillion years ago in a Big Bang like ours. And one of the differences between our universe and the Tao universe, just like the dimension that the Plejaren live in, is again there are more people on planets that are closer together. And that's one of the reasons why the Timmers left our universe and went into this other universe. They are descended from the Lyrians just like we are. Many of the people on Earth are descended from the people from Lyra Vega. And I sometimes refer to these people as, what's the right term for them? They were so far advanced in their technologies, and they were still suffered from what you might call the war syndrome. So, in any sense, Ascot's peoples moved into this parallel universe to ours. And Ascot came back to the Earth for a couple of reasons, one of which was to mentor Billy, and the other was to be involved in this project. The Timbers were involved in a project to keep us from destroying ourselves. Something would have happened in the 70s, or actually before the 70s, that would have caused the Earth to be lost. So I don't know if it was a nuclear war. They never really elaborated. So somewhere between the 50s and the 70s, we would have done ourselves in if it hadn't been for Ascot's people and the work they were doing here on the Earth. So, our history is different, very different than what we've been told. It's extremely interesting. It's very convoluted in some senses. What the universe is all about is very different than what we've been told. Understanding the creational natural laws is very, very critical. And this is one of the things that Svath taught Billy, that everything in the universe is bound together. Everything of the universe is one, and it's all bound together. So one of the things we strive for is, when we look at everything else, to recognize that we are part of this greater whole. And one of the passages that I always remember from this material is that love is the highest principle in all creation. And everything exists in absolute logic. So there is a complete logic to how the universe works. And everything exists in the logic of creation. So there is a oneness to the universe. Billy talks about this in one of his articles, the source of the oneness of the universe. And it says that the whole universe is a oneness which flows through all things, all existence, and all life. In this oneness, the human being who has distinct needs is also integrated, whereupon the universal oneness also responds when he or she brings his words to expression. It responds to the positive thoughts and feelings, and to the positive word pronounced. And indeed, in an equally directed wise, consequently, a positive reaction takes place. So it's so important to keep your thoughts in the neutral positive state, so that the universal oneness will also respond to you and to your thoughts in a neutral positive way. Because if you have negative thoughts, it responds to your negative thoughts in a negative way. And there is something called Love Letter 27, and I'll just share with you a couple things that it says off the top of my head here. It says, the incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation. And no life is able to exist without love, without the light of love. However, no light is able to exist without love and truth. And it's interesting, when Billy was a young boy, he recognized the light that the stars shone, but he also recognized an invisible light, which he called the love of creation. Now, the German word for creation is Schöpfung, or the universal consciousness. And the Meier information says that the universe is creation's internal and external body. And the physical universe that we live in is the material manifestation of the wisdom of creation. Semyase said it this way. She said, love and wisdom go together. And the creation and its laws are love and wisdom at the same time. And everything which exists in the whole universe is a manifestation of the might and the infinite and true love of the mighty universal consciousness. So if you go out into nature, and I hope you had time to do that today, and if you open up your senses, you can experience the radiating love of creation. The incredible beauty of nature is the physical expression, the visible expression of the love of creation. The love of creation radiates. There's also, in Billy's book called The Goblet of Truth, a paragraph which is called What the Truth Knows to Say. And it goes on and says, rivers, stones, plants, animals, bushes, trees, everything that crawls and flies on the earth is a life form with a spirit form. And these spirit forms are on a journey through time which involve many, many lifetimes. And that death is just the passage to rebirth. Rebirth into the world of pure spirit. And many of these creatures are connected by psychic vibration. And they're aware of each other. So if you go into the forest in the evening particularly, or early in the morning, you can hear the cicadas, you can hear all the birds as they sing. And we live on a planet in this physical universe's material belt. And there are 7 of these belts of creation. This creation has an infinite and effective love. And it has something called creational natural laws. And the first of these creational natural laws is the law of love. And the love that we're talking about here is the highest form of love. It's called effective love. It's not romantic love. Romantic love is a false kind of love that can turn into rage and be very unstable. True love is true being, and it is the everlasting warmth from the center of creation, which is described as true existence. Love is the highest principle of creation, and through it everything exists in absolute logic. The love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. The individual should therefore be aware that he exists only through the love of creation, and that he carries this love also within himself. Creation created everything in love and logic, and put that same love in all of its creatures, so that life itself is love. The other great law is the law of striving, which is the fundamental law of all evolution. Without striving, there exists no life. Without striving, there is no happiness. And I tell people, if you're feeling unhappy right now, then really focus on your striving. really focus on your work. Whatever work you can do, even if you're unemployed, you can work cleaning out your garage or working on your garden or something. Striving is the key to happiness in life. I want to read to you something about striving that's discussed on page 102 of The Way to Live. It says, striving creates the life. Write it to the being. Striving means delectation in a form which is always fulfilling and progressive. To be without striving means unwillingness and affliction. Affliction is inhibited striving and inhibited life. So if you're having affliction, you have inhibited striving. But inhibited striving and inhibited life also bring inhibited evolution. So if you cut back on your striving, you're going to inhibit your evolution. You're also going to have stagnation, hopelessness, grief, confusion, irrationality, joylessness, cognitionlessness, unpeace, disharmony, lovelessness, resentment, lies, deceit. It goes on and on and on and on in this section here, talking about all the bad things that can happen if you don't focus on striving enough. So the law of striving is incredibly important. It's the fundamental law of all evolution. Without striving, there is no life. Striving requires an expenditure of effort and must be achieved through a hard work. Striving is not simply dropped into one's lap. And that again and again, there are circumstances which work against the striving. So keep that in mind. If you're focusing on striving and you keep getting these, it'll happen off and on. You'll notice these things that interrupt your striving. Just stay cool, stay calm, stay neutral, positive. It's the part of the process. It will happen. It has to be in accord with a natural law that an opposite pole is positioned against the striving. So you're going to have something that interrupts your striving. Based on the teaching of the creational law that there must always be two poles in life, a plus and a minus, a pro and a con, a negative and a positive. Together the two poles always produce one, a oneness and equalizeness. That's the law of striving. The other law is the law of harmony. The law of harmony, in a quick sense, just tells us to be neutral, positive in our thinking. Always to be neutral, positive in your thinking. Because good thinking leads to good feelings. Good feelings lead to good habits. And good habits lead to good circumstances in your life. You are the master of your own destiny. You control the circumstances in your life, although it doesn't seem like it. We are not the victim of circumstances. We actually control the circumstances of our life through both our conscious and unconscious thoughts. Now, remember we have an external and internal growth, just like a tree. A tree, its roots is the part we don't see. The crown and the trunk is the part that we do see. And the tree that collapses in stormy weather is the tree that has its roots laid out too flat. So the same thing happens to us. We will collapse under stormy weather if we haven't made the necessary focus on learning to control our thoughts. The book, The Might of the Thoughts, is dedicated to a humankind that is ill in its consciousness. And what we're fighting against is kind of a illness in the consciousness that exists all over the earth. And one of the big problems that we have here on the earth is that evolution of the consciousness can only come about through independent thinking. But more and more, our thinking is stunted on the earth because we live in a consumer society. Everything is pre-chewed, and overpopulation has destroyed so much of nature that people have turned into kind of a zombie state. They've turned off their sensitivities. They've turned off their emotions. They've turned off their awarenesses. See, if you go, this reminds me of an old John Denver song. You fill up my senses like night in a forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain. Well, that is the influence of nature, you see. It wakes up the senses. But what's happening because of overpopulation, because of the destruction of nature, there is no refreshment. People do not have the refreshment of nature. So people turn to television, they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol. One of the interesting things is, particularly music today, is really a reflection of our overpopulation, in my estimate. Much of our music is heavy metal or the heavy beat of rap, and sometimes a cross between the two. And there's kind of a hysteria associated with this music. There's one, I don't even know who the band is, but the song is sometimes played before the fighting championships, the UFC, and there's a repeating passage in the song that says, "Let the bodies hit the floor, let the bodies hit the floor," something like that. And there's this screaming. It's like a hysteria. And this is really symbolic of society right now. And it's like Elizabeth Moosberger said when she wrote the foreword in the book, The Might of Thoughts. She said that this book is dedicated to a society that's ill in its consciousness. So what we're fighting for is health in our consciousness. And our might is anchored in our thoughts. And there's an old saying which says the human being is the forger of his or her own fortune. Indeed, in the form that the human being forms his or her luck by means of his or her thoughts. Neutral positive thinking, therefore, means that both positive and the negative must be brought together and equalized. One of the things you get from being out in nature is kind of a negative ion. And if you're feeling negative ions, if you're in a place, particularly if you're elevated a little bit, and you get a wind of negative ions, your body will feel neutral positive. It's very healthy. And that's what we're doing with our thoughts. We're trying to clarify our thoughts so they become less confused and more clearly comprehensible. And the clarifying means to make easier to understand, to clear out uncertainty. To clarify means to make an idea, a statement, free from ambiguity. You see, the word confusion means a lack of understanding and uncertainty. Confusion comes from a Latin word which means to pour things together. So with confusion, the boundary between things are lost, and the distinctions become lost. The more our thoughts have a purpose, the more they have an intention, the more our thoughts will become clarified. A lot of times, for me, I go back over things again and again and again, and if you know this show, then you know that's true. And there's a German word called Klärung, which is a German word for clarification. And we should practice clarifying our thoughts. And when your thoughts become clear, your consciousness becomes like a garden, which will start to flower with all of these beautiful plants inside. The consciousness is like a garden. If it's correctly maintained, you have these beautiful plants growing in the garden of your consciousness. But the human being can gather sweet fruits or bitter fruits depending on what your thoughts are. So if you have healthy, clear thoughts, you have a beautiful garden in your consciousness and happiness. However, look out for negative and repeating negative thoughts. And you want to get away from these, because what the human being thinks, he makes real. Good and positive thoughts must be tended and nurtured. Another thing you have to do is have a good opinion of yourself. One of the things that's talked about in the book, the book, The Art to Live and the Way to Live, is that you have to be your own best friend. And it's a very, very important thing. And you also should never let yourself be seduced by these hasty ideas, trying to bring things into fruition. You've got to be a slow and steady. Is what wins the race. You need to be slow and steady in that sense. It's very, very important to be consistent. And another good bit of advice is straightforwardness in everything. A wise human being remains a student for life, and you should always be a student. And to be a good student, it takes time to learn these things. And we've talked about love a lot tonight and harmony, and these are things that come with the clarification of our thinking. So the human being, again, attracts what he or she is. And that one passage that I said earlier is very applicable, that the human being attracts and brings into fruition everything which he consciously or secretly strives for and loves. So we bring about the thoughts that bring about either inner imprisonment or freedom. So when you think a thought, you want to steer it towards the neutral positive so you have inner freedom. Let me read just a second here from this Billy's article again. Recognize from this that the universal oneness releases a manifold fullness for the life and its joy and harmony and love in order to make thee full of the joys of life, peaceful, harmonious, and happy, if only you take hold of the chance to do so and allow yourself regarding this to fulfill your needs through the source of the oneness of the universe. So we literally can fulfill our needs through the source of the oneness of the universe. You know, your spirit form has an area in it called the Gemut. And the Gemut controls the thoughts and the feelings of the spiritual consciousness. You have an inner eye. That's very, very important. You have a what you could call a real you and a false you. The two struggle against one another. For example, the human being's eye is a very mighty is very mighty. You have a true I and a false I. Your false self exercises a tyranny, sometimes which is called Gewaltsamkeit. The I attempts, the wrong I, the false I, attempts to complicate everything and deny everything because it knows very precisely that it's fundamentally endangered by knowledge, truth, and evolution. Have you ever sensed that? I've sensed that before. There's a part of me that's, in fact, feels endangered by evolution. And I used to have that sense more about the Meyer material. It's like, there's part of you that's going to go away from learning this stuff. And that false I doesn't like that fact. So let me continue here. I wanted to pull up page 416 in the book here. It says, the human being's I is very mighty and exercises a tyranny characterized by Gewaltsamkeit, which can only be ended by one going the way of effective evolution. So to get out of the tyranny of your own false I, and one of the tyrannies that you'll experience is the rotating of your negative thinking. That's the false I that's rotating and rotating, and it's always struggling. But the I's richness of imagination is almost inexhaustible, for which reason, on each step of the efforts and the wishes to free oneself from its tyrannical nature, it can circumvent and distort the efforts and wishes as desired. If the necessary care is not applied, the truth of all truth is not acknowledged and helpfully enlisted. The truth of the teaching of the effective evolution in all creational moments is simple and extremely clear, but it stipulates that everything is recognized and understood and is correctly used. However, the self-willed and tyrannical I is very mighty, and as soon as the simple and clear truth begins to work in the human being and stirs and moves him or her, the I attempts to complicate and deny everything because it knows very precisely that it fundamentally is endangered by knowledge, truth, and evolution. All of the I's inhibiting attempts to sabotage the way of evolution are senseless and negating despite all of its efforts. If one continues to go the way of the realization of the positive, whereby the practice of the meditation is a very great help, through which it slowly recognizes how many inner matters of the I need changing and evolution, and is also recognized how one has let oneself be duped up to the point by the I's false hopes and empty promises. Anyway, I've run out of time. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I'm always learning from this material. It's just absolutely amazing. Have a good evening. I should be back tomorrow if all goes well. Stay away from the tyranny of your false self and focus on your true self, your real inner self, which is influenced by the spirit form. Have a great evening.